Hello and welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show. It's a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of property, as the founding fathers would always have intended. And founding fathers would probably want you, if they knew what it was, that Gino was born a little bit after, to live your best life, living the EOS life. And in that series, we have Jeff Peck. Jeff, you live in Wisconsin. You're a Bears fan, and you also have spent some time living where I live in South Central PA. What in the world? Tell us about your journey today. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thanks, Ross. Pleasure to be here. I come from a background of entrepreneurs. So my grandparents, or my grandfather, I should say, and his brothers, had a mobile roller rink business in the West Coast. So they would put up, tear down roller rinks, and then move it from California, Arizona, Nevada, work that loop around. My father had a printing company with his best friend. So my track, I thought, was going to be to take over the printing company with his partner's son, who was also my best friend, and be second generation business owners. And as it turned out, my dad found out that his partner and best friend was funneling money from the company. And then I don't think he was really quite the same after that. So rather than going to entrepreneurial track, I did about 8 years in the military, 3 active, 4.5 in the reserves, went and got my college degree. I wanted to be a history teacher, teach secondary ed. But
Did you do that for a stint?
No, I did not. I made it through the student teaching pieces, but at the same time, I had found a third shift supervisory position at Party Like Gifts, and they're the home candle and party thing. But what I didn't know was it was a 20,000 square foot warehouse, and in 4 years that I was there, we grew it to 2 buildings over 800,000 square feet. 70,000 pallet positions racked. I think we had 45 swing reach truck. I mean, it was insane.
What?
Yeah, and fully state of the art, everything. And I just became fascinated with operations.
Jeff, as someone that had a 32,000 square foot warehouse that was thinking about going from that to like 110 square foot warehouse, and we thought that was a jump, what you just said is bonkers. So, like, what are some of the ways or things you learned of that exponential growth? Like, how'd that happen?
Well, I was very young in my career at the time. I think I was the youngest manager there at the time. And what I learned is that, anything is possible if you can conceive of it and work toward it. I think was the biggest lesson I took away from it. And obviously, they brought in a consulting group for the design and everything, but I think we worked 9 months of Saturdays in a row just to get there. And the people who stuck it out, they got rewarded with promotions. That's how I got promoted into leadership there. And then it just created a whole bunch of different opportunities for me along my journey.
I love hearing a story of a company grow like that and then really reinvesting in employees and helping them grow too. Sometimes private equity gets a bad rap, and sometimes it's justified, where they're just like, your business is in cutting people down, reducing expenses. And it's like, yeah, but you can also grow by treating your employees as investments and assets, and appreciating an asset makes it grow.
No, I think you're spot on with that comment, Ross. I think most people, they just tap into the physical piece with the task piece. They don't tap into enough of the brain power. And it's there if you're talking with your people and working with your people side by side and trying to understand, the job from their perspective.
Jeff, I'm going to take a pretty hard left turn because I know we talked about this off air, and I need to get it off my chest. You just said something that everyone should take to heart and believe, that if you can conceive it and you can believe it, then you can achieve it, which it's a loose quote from Conor McGregor before his prelapsarian fall from grace. But I love that quote nonetheless. You were a part of Amazon, and you told me something interesting about that experience. Can we tap into the Amazon? Because, and also maybe the question is leading in, where was it with the operations that got you to Amazon? How'd you get there?
Yeah, no, great question. So the vice president of distribution at the time had left Party Light and went to Amazon, and he kind of recruited me to go through the process. And I had never heard of them. I didn't even have a home computer at the time. I mean, this was 1999.
Whoa. That, yeah, I guess
So
that the timing would have been right, wouldn't it?
yeah, when you were carrying around the cell phones that weigh 10 pounds
Yeah.
and that time, and they were putting up, they were starting to expand, and I worked in the we did the startup for their second big box. So it was 1 million square foot, pick towers, 4 stories high. I remember when we opened, there were 200 trucks waiting out on the country road, and we only had 3 dock doors.
No.
Yeah, because we were still under construction on the back half of the building.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so yeah, we had some fun conversations that day with some of the truck drivers, but eventually we got it done, and we started up in October, so it was right before the holidays. So if I remember correctly,
Great timing, Jeff.
well, I mean, we had to bring on like a few hundred temporary employees. Now, this is a county that only has 2,000 people. I mean,
What?
we had to, yep. So we had to truck the merchandise to Lexington and Louisville because the local post office couldn't handle all of the freight coming.
Were you in Kentucky at this time?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
South Central Kentucky. Yep.
Yeah.
And but I will say that a couple things I learned from there is Jeff Bezos is very passionate about taking care of the customer.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, and I say that because I remember when we ramped up, and customer service reported to me at that time, they flew 23 customer service agents out to Seattle for 3 weeks, all expenses paid, to be trained the way that they wanted them to be trained.
I love that.
Yeah, that told me everything I needed to know pretty much about the company. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a mind. It's so counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of people. But when you think about what you just said, a core value, it reminds me of, was it Letter to Stakeholders? Jeff Bezos has as a famous work. I think that's what it's called. But when you have that passion and you understand that your customer is your greatest compounding asset, when you can retain them and keep them and make them happy and do what it takes, because it's the lifetime of that customer. But it starts with customer service. It's the experience. It's when people, when they have a problem, you train and you invest in the people that help to solve their problem. A lot of people look at customer service as a not a glorious gig, but Jeff Bezos was ahead of his time in making that investment.
Well, his term, Ross, was customer delight.
Even better.
He wanted the customer to be delighted. And I remember when we shipped our first book from that facility, we sat together as a team and composed a letter to the customer. Hey, this is our first package shipped from this site. So it's just those little things that they did.
It's like a much cooler version of the restaurant owner who puts their first dollar bill earned up on the wall.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
No, and then it was there where I was first exposed to panel interviewing.
Oh.
And they were tough. I mean, probably I think I did 4 different panels in a day, and then 1 phone panel. So they were pretty selective on who they let in the.
And you did operations with Amazon, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was first I was the inbound operations manager, and then when Jeff Wolke came on board, and for those of the audience that don't know Jeff, he ran the customer experience, but he was hired in and he brought Lean Six Sigma into Amazon. Jeff Wolke did, and so that was where I was first exposed to Lean Six Sigma and got my black belt training from.
Well, as someone that loves operations, that's just a nice feather to have in your cap, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were very far ahead of their time, and it just happened so quick. I think they can put up 1 million square foot box and have it fully operational in 6 months or less. It's crazy.
It blows my mind what human has as potential when you just get, when you, like as Abraham Lincoln said, when you take the first 4 hours to sharpen the axe,
That's right.
and then it only takes 2 to cut down the tree. It really is true. I mean, one other example, you've lived in Manheim, Pennsylvania for a little bit, so I'm sure you've met an Amish or 2 or buggy.
Sure.
if you see some of the speed in which they can put up a barn by working together and having like they know the system, like they don't have to even, they don't, by heart, by memory, by muscle memory. There was that terrible natural disaster in Asheville, North Carolina, and some of the Amish from the area went down. They were rebuilding houses in a day.
Yep.
And that's kind of the same mentality it seems like with Amazon and some other entrepreneurs. I know Musk like really condenses timelines, and he goes, oh, you think it's going to be 6 months, let's try 2 weeks. But then if you get it done in 3 weeks, yeah, you're over budget, but it's still 5 months faster than 6 months.
Right. Yeah, that's
So,
another visionary too.
oh man, we're not talking about politics here, strictly business,
Got it.
but you got to give respect where it's due in business.
Absolutely.
So, with your background in operations, you know, man, it seems like you've had several careers in your career. You also have done all kinds of things in terms of leadership and coaching, and there's data collection and revenue, performance management, all kinds of stuff. What was, when you were with Amazon, what was your next step in the journey, and why, and what was that pivot like?
Well, I like to think of Amazon, at least back in that time. I mean, it was a lifestyle, and it was a gazillion hours a week. I mean, 80 to 90 weren't uncommon. And when I tell people that, they don't believe me, but it's true. And I'm sure it's eased up since then.
Yep. Jeff, you're only 40.
Yeah, that's right.
For those who are watching.
But, it was taking the toll on the family. And,
yeah.
It pretty much came down to, hey, it's either us or Amazon. And, so that decision was a pretty easy one to make. So,
and I'm glad you made it.
But now for the up and comers and maybe the people that didn't have families, it would have been ideal. But just at that point, I had a young daughter. I missed a ton of stuff, and just eventually just didn't become a good fit. So I moved on from there. So
Jeff, I need to tell you a story. That story hits close to home for me. I was working 70, 80, 90 hours when I was with private equity. Again, not uncommon, similar but different. And when I was in the delivery room for my first and so far only child, I was getting yelled at by my wife, by the nurse, because I was working in the delivery room. Not proud moment. And that was the call. That was the come to Jesus moment where I was like, okay, I can either change who I am now that like life has changed. I have a kid in the world, or I can like sacrifice the most important thing for the career. So to me, it was like, it was like no brainer.
But what's funny, Ross, is you're kind of taught, at least that's how I would, you work.
Yeah.
And, and you do that to take care of your family.
Yeah.
And so, I think if I reflect on it for a little bit, that's what I was focused on, but I don't think that ever really translated to the family side. They just viewed it as me not being there when they needed me.
Well, I had a little advantage because I was introduced to the EOS life, so I could conceive of what was possible before. And I was like, at this point, this is not my best life. But I knew, like, thankfully through EOS, and and that's probably one of the things you help business owners today with, right? Is living that holistic, well-rounded, intrinsically rewarding life, right?
No, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. I had worked for a company. So after, I don't know, 20 years, Ross, and 25 years doing operation stuff, I was just, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I just wasn't happy where I was career-wise. I mean, I've lived in 10 different states. I lived in overseas when I was in the service, Kentucky 3 separate times, Minnesota a couple times. And I was just like, there's got to be something better here. And while I was contemplating that question, a CFO I used to work with gave me a ring and said, hey, Jeff, there's this company in Minnesota, just a small town north of Rochester, and I think you'll really like it here. We need a leader for the operations and transportation. Why don't you check it out? Well, what he didn't tell me was that they were running on EOS at that time.
Oh.
And about 3 months in, I was blown away. I mean, blown away. And I began to ask myself, why aren't all these other companies running on EOS? I mean, we've had those jobs, right, where it's like 3:01 on a Sunday afternoon, and you're like,
Brother,
Mondays.
the case of the Mondays pre-EOS was a real thing.
Yeah, it was. And I've had jobs like that, and I told myself I would never again stay at a job that I didn't like. But this one here, I loved, and I loved the process, and I loved the fact that everyone was rowing in the same direction. And we were crushing our targets. People were communicating. We were open and honest with each other. And man, it was such a privilege to be a part of that. And then from there, I went into consulting for small businesses. And so for about the last 10 to 12 years, I've been teaching the tools and then just decided to make the leap about 8 months ago to do it full time. So
That's interesting. So you went from that organization where you saw what good looked like through the EOS lens, and you were just like, "Yep, this is it. This is what I like." EOS. But then you were doing consulting. Were you doing operations or just like C-suite consulting? What kind of consulting were you doing?
no, it was just it was small businesses. Okay, but they weren't running on EOS. So typically, what I would do is I would teach them how to do an accountability chart, how to run their L10 meetings, things like that. But then, and they loved those. But I then realized through studying the material that they're not going to get the full benefit out of it unless all of the tools are implemented. And I didn't
Mm.
know how to teach some of the tools, so I would give them what would work to help kickstart what they needed to do. And then I just said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot here full time. So yeah, 59 years young, career change. So, but no, it's been a great journey, and the people I work with are just truly, truly remarkable.
Can you tell me any stories of some leaders or mentors along the way that have positively impacted you?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to my squad leader when I was a young tanker in the Army,
Okay.
and we were doing an in-ranks inspection, and he says, Peck, he goes, how come Gomez, who's my crew member, my crewmate, how come he has a thread hanging off his uniform? I said, I don't know, Sarge, ask Gomez. And then about 50 push-ups later, he asked, do you know why I made you do those push-ups? I'm like, no, Sergeant. He said, because you didn't look after your buddy.
Oh.
And so I'd never forgot that lesson the rest of my life. I was 19 years old, I think, when I told that. So that was one. Another one was when I was working the third shift. This was before I was at a party line, work at a medical distributor where I would send parts like for MRI machines and route them on the next flight, things of that nature. And I had worked for a guy, his name was Lou. He was an old guy, never said much, but he just like commanded respect. You know, he always asked how your family was. I don't think I heard him say like 15 words, maybe. But he always asked how my family was. And yeah, I'd worked there 7 years, and I was working on my degree, and I was getting turned down for promotion. So after about 3 or 4 turndowns, I finally asked him the question. I go, Lou, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I mean, I'm picking up all of the holidays, the weekends, all the overtime. I'm putting in. I'm killing the productivity numbers. And then he looked at me and he called everyone guy, whether you're male or female. He looked at me. He goes, "Guy, you don't know how to talk to people." And he walked away. And I mean, that just crushed me to the ground. And I really had to do some soul searching and digging. That was when I was in my early 20s.
What did you learn from that? Like what were some of the things, the behaviors you changed?
Well, I think it's important for the audience to understand, like when you transition out of the military,
Mm.
go right in, and then I was a drill instructor as well. That's the only way I knew how to lead. So, the running joke was when I was on the floor supervising, people would have to drop and do push-ups, and just because my voice is naturally louder and it comes off across as more of threat, if it's elevated.
Yeah, you don't have a feminine voice, Jeff.
No, thank you.
That's a compliment. Nothing wrong with having a feminine voice. I'm just saying you don't have one.
But I think what I've learned from it, Ross, is just being more self-aware.
Yeah.
But no, to hear that from a guy that I really respected, I mean, that's when I started digging in and started really working on Jeff.
But Jeff, I think it's true that if you didn't really respect him, it wouldn't have had the impact that it did, right? It's so much easier to take feedback from somebody. When I say easier, I should reframe that. It's so much more impactful to take feedback from someone you respect. So
Mhm.
he got the respect from you first, and then he waited till you asked him. Which that guy, he's got talk about. Was it walk softly, carry a big stick? Kind of some probably Teddy
No,
Roosevelt, I
and he
think.
was a great guy. I never heard him raise his voice one time. But he was just that. It's hard to put the finger on. I mean, he just. All I remember from him is he always asked how your family was, and he never criticized you. He never had anything bad to say about anyone.
He wasn't mad; he was just disappointed,
Yeah, exactly,
which is
exactly.
worse.
Yeah,
Well, not it's more it's more effective. It's better.
right.
Do you know why I made you do push-ups? And that made me think of Lean Six Sigma, where it's like the why behind the accident, right?
Yep,
And there's like, was it 5 or 6 whys you have to get to the bottom of?
yep.
And he just skipped. He like that guy could have had some Six Sigma in the back of his mind, where he's like, no, the thing that you have control over that you could have done differently from the other 4 or 5 things that happened in between there was having your buddy's back, and that is gold for anyone listening, because people think of extreme ownership as in themselves on an island. But when you're in a team, my experience is a true leader doesn't exalt themselves above the rest. They exalt everyone else and humble themselves. And by doing so, like the second leader you mentioned, they command respect.
Yep. No, I think the idea is you got to raise that level of awareness and elevate that team above you. And I've tried to take the approach where we're all equals here, and everyone brings different things to the table. And I think it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that we're tapping into those unique talents and abilities to help accomplish whatever we're trying to accomplish.
Speaking of winning teams, can you talk at all about what the culture was like at Amazon versus some of the other organizations? I know you had some great examples of culture, right? I
Yep.
mean, U.S. military, back-to-back World War champs, like
Yep.
no one can disagree that the United States military is one of, if not the best military of all time. So like that's an interesting culture in and of itself. I would like to understand. But then
Sure.
you had the EOS culture and Amazon, three winning cultures, pretty distinctly different. What do they have in common?
Well, I think when you're looking at organizations like an Amazon size, I mean, just to build the culture that they've been able to do is pretty remarkable. I remember early on, they would do things like we had a big luau out in the middle of a country park somewhere, and they brought in live music, and they did like a pig roast and the whole and everyone was invited. They actually shut down, or no, they had on a weekend or on a day that we were shut down. So they just did stuff like that. It was encouraged for you to talk to your peers across the network and share. So they had a high degree of accountability, and Amazon does. So does EOS. So I'd say that would be like one commonality, because what you learn, Ross, is the performers love accountability.
Oh
They like
yeah.
to understand, and the people that don't like it, they're going to kind of squirm and wiggle and kind of work their way out of it. So I think, again, for a company that size to send the same message. But I think what Amazon did differently too is at least back in that day, I remember my onboarding. They flew me out to the Nevada facility for 2 weeks. And before you even went to the floor, 1 week was you just got the history of Amazon, what it was like to take care of that. So they immerse you in the Amazon culture very quickly there. And it doesn't take you long to figure out if you're going to fit in or not.
Guns N' Roses, welcome to the jungle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think that's what's kind of unique. But I mean, if you swing over to EOS, I mean, what's not to like? I love to help people by nature. I get to help them, run their businesses, and then I get to, live my own EOS life. So that's a win-win. But EOS, the culture is rooted in everything that we do. So Gino, I think, did a masterful job of when you really study EOS, and the tools are really simple. Not simple to implement, but I don't know if you could create anything any simpler from the front to back end than what Gino created. It's just remarkable. I mean, I see a ton of value in it. I mean, I remember the company I worked at. I mean, I'll give you an example. We increased capacity, outbound capacity, by 700% without adding any headcount.
How?
No, we invested like 15,000 in a piece of automation. Yep.
The one big thing, right? It's like it's an EOS rocks, right? If you solve the most important things, then it's like the domino effect. If you get the one domino knocked over, things just fell into place.
Well, if that wasn't a small company, if that was a big company, I would have to go through all these approval processes for the capital request, delaying and potentially threatening the customer base, because the goal at the place that I worked at was orders that came in by 5 p.m. that day shipped that day. So if you were behind, the team knew, you might have to make a call home and have dinner waiting in the oven until we finished. So no, but it's just amazing at what it does, and I can't speak of it highly enough, Ross. It's transformed so many people and so many businesses. I think there's, I don't even remember, at least over 200,000 companies using the tools. And probably,
I think it's 230,000.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And then I think between all the implementers, over 275,000 full day sessions. So
there's 850-ish
implementers. Yep.
It's worldwide. Now it's worldwide. I really think, Jeff, to speak about the EOS culture and journey, you're in it. I'm one of those sort of cheerleaders on the side, if you will. I think that's going to continue to grow, because I think that the supply of only having 850 implementers with the market demand that people are going to see, because on one hand, like you said, there's these automations, which can get businesses to become incredibly more efficient.
Sure.
But then you have the necessity to optimize human capital, right? I believe that the United States is one of the greatest economies and countries on earth, because the idea of the American dream still to this day exists. Like we said before, if you can conceive it and you can believe it, you can achieve it. But what people can't yet conceive, or they're starting to conceive now that the US is getting more adoption, is that you can be successful and a good person and have time for your passions and be compensated appropriately and work with people you love. You can have it all. And AI can't do that, right?
No, no, it can't. But, I think I'm glad you brought this up, Ross, because I think with AI, it's definitely going to need more people with leadership skills, I think, moving forward. And I read an article, I forgot where it was from, that said there was some crazy number, like 80 to 85% of the new jobs by 2030 are going to be new jobs that we don't know exist.
I believe it.
Yeah, I do too. And so for the people that maybe aren't going to pursue, or at least brush up on AI.
I mean, crap, 30 years ago, being an EOS implementer wasn't really an opportunity, I don't think.
No, it wasn't. I mean, the World Wide Web was invented in 95.
Yeah.
I mean, so
that's 30 years.
Think about how fast it's evolved. It's kind of scary a little bit.
It's scary to us because we're, by being a singular human and not having there's a quote by an MMA coach, Firas Zahabi, that says, if you have a divine calculator, then every problem can be solved. But you and I don't have a divine calculator inside of ourselves, but we're a part of what I think of a divine calculator, which is the collective of human intelligence. And humans have been getting really intelligent really fast on average, right? Some places around the world are still doing the same things they've been doing for thousands of years. Okay, fine, that's fine. But 200 years ago, to think that, quick story. Are you familiar with the show Yellowstone?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right. So I love that show. But I saw a graph recently that says to travel from New York City to Bozeman, Montana, it takes you half a day if you go direct. But even in the show 1923, which is only 100 years ago, it was perilous. It was over a week, and it was by plane, train, no, not plane, but by train, car, all that. And it ended up killing, sorry for the spoilers, anyone listens, but like just to travel from one side of the country, not even the whole way to the other coast, we take that for granted, right? But collectively, we can all reap the benefit. And I want businesses to listen to our conversation and say, like, wow, look how much better with time EOS ages like a fine.
Oh
Yeah.
no, it does, and it's like anything. You have to put the reps in, and you have to follow the process. But I highly encourage those people out there that if you're thinking about um, pulling the trigger on it to do so, because no time is really a good time. So um, what's the saying? The best time to plant an oak was 100 years ago. Next best
Yeah.
time is now. So,
Yeah.
but no, it's
So
it's just I can't say enough about it. So.
speaking of timing, I find that people that either I've interacted with or maybe watched the show might be working in a job that they don't want to do, or they're thinking about starting their own business, being an entrepreneur. And one of the hardest conversations is, well, I'm not ready yet, or maybe later, or once I do XYZ. And I kind of liken it to parenthood, where it's like there's never a supremely ideal time to have a child. And same thing with that. But like you've made career pivot after career pivot. How can you speak to the timing, especially from being an employee, working in leadership, then to being a business consultant, then the EOS implementer? Can you talk about like the timing of those and
Sure.
what that was like in transition and pivoting?
Well, I'll tell you that all of the times weren't good times, and I think we're wired to do the easy stuff. And once I started to learn that if I wanted to tackle the hard stuff and push myself outside the operation zone and study finance and sales and marketing so I could be a good, a really good consultant, then that's what I needed to do it. So I think it's fear. I mean, that's all it is. But at the same time, no time, I just can't say this enough. No time is a good time. So if you're thinking about it, go do it. And you can figure it out as you go. That's the best. That's the best thing I can probably offer the audience. Because I mean, I was there and I know what it's like. But man, I'm so happy I made the move. And has there been challenges? Of course, there always is, but success isn't easy. You got to work for it, and you have to be disciplined every day. That's what it comes down to. Some days are better than others for everyone. We all have
Oh,
bad days.
sure. That's to be human. I
Yeah.
think one thing you mentioned earlier that I want to circle back to is it wasn't uncommon for you to work many Saturdays in a row and 70, 80, 90-hour weeks when you're an employee. And the same is true when you're an entrepreneur. It's just that there's no org chart or leadership team to point your finger at. You got to point the finger back. If you don't like your boss and you're your own boss, then you got to do some clarity breaks, look in the mirror, maybe. But I think the other side of that, for everyone listening, I love this quote. I think it's by Layla Hermosi, is that fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think like if you can spend 20 hours of concentrated effort, you can become competent at like most things. And when you're working 80 hours a week, you're only saying 25% of 1 week's worth of my time to get competent enough that I can like understand and get started, get past the Luddite, like beginner novice stage. I mean, compound interest is a marvelous thing. So what's your discipline like and your schedule like now that you've been consulting versus, when you were in the military where they drill instructor said, all right, you have to do this by legal decree because you signed up for the military. That for some people I found that are veterans, they miss that structure. But how do you keep the structure and discipline without the military, without Amazon telling you to do it?
No, that's a great question and something I've struggled with recently, but I think we're over the hump now. So my approach is I determine the amount of hours I want to work per week. And so what I mean by that, so let's just say in my case it's 50 hours per week. So out of that 50 hours, I have 15 carved out for just studying EOS, getting better at the craft. In the community, we call it EOS mastery, and that's something that we all strive to do. Then, usually a couple hours of the day, I got my nose in a book trying to learn about something new, or I'm trying to learn about AI and trying to apply it, do those things. But the difference is I built in flexibility to my schedule. So I know when I'm going to be working. I keep a scorecard on myself. I track what I do. That helps me keep myself accountable. And if I get stuck, I could pick up the phone and call one of my 850 friends in the community that are always willing to help, and the support there is, and they'll give you what I call the relentless love. So
I love that.
yeah, no, and they're great, but they've been there too. So the most experienced people, they always say, you know what, hey Jeff, we've been there. We've been through that. Just ask, or what are you struggling with?
Yeah, the highest trees have the deepest roots.
Yeah, exactly. And man, that community. I mean, I'll tell you, there's just so many talented people in there. It's just amazing to be around them, and I'm very privileged and grateful to be a part of it, because the things that community does. I mean, I could talk about all of the fundraising events that they do on the side, or an implementer needs help or is struggling. I mean, it's just top notch. It just hard to describe in words.
You said something that reminds me of the story, the allegory of the rocks, which is you have a few non-negotiables in your calendar, then you have some flexibility. So if your EOS mastery is a non-negotiable, and then your development on skill mastery, that's not necessarily EOS, but to be better at an implementer and a consultant, and then the other stuff fills in around it. Like that needs to be highlighted, because you can be agile and flexible, but still get all your stuff done, still work really hard. It's just you have your priorities in line. Like there's non-negotiables.
Well, I think the non-negotiables are if you really watch a person or people work. I mean, the mobile phone is a productivity killer, and in my opinion. And so when I set aside that work time, it has to be uninterrupted, focused work. That's why I'm able to do the things that I'm able to do, because what happens is you start on your most important task, or your one or two most important things you have to get done today. You get pulled off of it. Now it takes you another 10 minutes to re-engage on it. You get pulled off of it again, another 10, and then you wonder where the whole day went and you didn't accomplish anything. So it has to be focused work. And I have to focus. I mean, there could be 10 people in the room, but if I'm working, I won't even notice them. But that's a skill I had to learn over many years. It's not easy, but if you can discipline yourself to do it daily, it does pay dividends.
Jeff, what's one challenge that if you could solve would make the most significant impact? Maybe in your life, maybe in the general public, maybe your client's life. But is there like a challenge that you have a mission to solve?
Well, one of the one of my missions is like financial literacy. And it's funny, I'm not going to mention the credit card company, but I'll get these blasts and they're like, hey, your 6-year-old kid can have a debit card. I'm like, well, question one, why does a 6-year-old kid need a debit card for? What happened to the piggy bank?
I know.
So, and I think, again, I go back to the mobile technology. I mean, you think about it. I know when I grew up, we were out in the streets or at the park running around, playing pickup baseball, football, whatever it was, all day and all night. Right? There was no sitting around the house. And if there was, my parents would be the first to let me know that, hey, there's no sitting around the house. Go out and do something constructive. And I just think with all of the barrage and all of the stimulus, it's, you have this like right now culture, and it really doesn't have to be that way. And, you can't keep printing money.
No. If you want it to be worth anything.
No, exactly right. And so, whenever I can, I do volunteer at the local high schools out here. They do like these mock financial things where they assign a kid like whether or not they have a spouse, kids, a job, and then they have to go get insurance and, a mortgage and all of that. And so I find those to be helpful, but mainly more helpful on how kids are taught than, uh, actually working it through a kid. But I mean, Ross, I don't have to go through the stats. I mean, most people have credit card debt. Most people are financing their homes. I mean, I could go down the whole.
I think it's like 30 cents on the dollar for the American person goes towards servicing debt, whether that's your mortgage or your credit card or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That's
And
insane.
no, and then it's like, why? Right? I mean, I have a
Well,
TV in my house. It doesn't even have an HDMI cable. That's how old it is.
but you're illustrating an important point. People used to, I think one of the things that it also comes down to is it's like people used to love people and use objects. And now I feel like sometimes people use people and love objects. And
Oh,
it's just like not, doesn't make financial sense, number one. And number two, it's not necessarily fulfilling. Like you don't feel good with that hyper consumerism. Not only are you digging yourself into debt that's completely avoidable, but like you said, you mentioned before with the military thing, you got to help your buddy out. And it
yeah.
feels good to help your buddy out. And it feels crappy when you don't help your buddy out.
No, you have to, what's the saying, right? You have to make money your servant, not your master.
Love that.
So hopefully we're able to get back a little bit to those in need. But the approach I've adopted is if I can't pay cash, I don't deserve it.
So what's one thing if you could talk to yourself when you were growing up and you watched your father's printing company and your best buddy and not saying it'd change anything, but like what's one piece of advice at that time in your life that you would give yourself if you could go back in time?
Well, maybe there was a way to. I mean, I don't know. I was a kid back then. I mean, in high school, so working in the shop. But my thing is you can't give up, and you're gonna have setbacks in life. And sorry, that's just the way life is. And I'm not gonna paint a rosy picture, but and I learned this I think later in life that it's how you respond to what happens to you versus complaining and why me and the whole world's out to get me, whatever you want to call it, and just really trying to not dwell on it, just say, hey, okay, get up, pick up the pieces and move forward. And that's what you have to do. And I think the quicker you can do that, the easier it is to make those pivots that we talked about earlier, Ross.
It begs the question, going back to the Six Sigma, the several why steps. It's like, if the questions you're asking yourself or the answers you're giving to the questions aren't helping the operation become more efficient, or in other words, they're not valuable or useful, then there's no point in asking them. Like, why me? Life's not fair. Okay, you're right. Now what? Like, how does it help anyone at all? It doesn't. Not to say that you can't lend sympathy to one another, you can't have empathy or understanding, but like, if you're on a mission, I love the quote that if you understand your purpose, you can endure almost any obstacle. Or if you understand your why, you can endure almost any how.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what you're talking about when you're saying, never give up. Well, it's easy to give up if you have no purpose. Then you say, well, why do I have no purpose? Right?
No, and but you're going to learn tough lessons. And, but, in order to do that, you have to, when we talk about leadership, I think the most successful leaders, they're great at leading theyselves first.
By example.
Yep. So, they're the ones that are walking the talk. They're practicing what they're preaching, however you want to term it. I don't mean to sound cliche-ish, but it's the people that manage themselves the best, I think, that make the best leaders. Because if you can't manage yourself, then you're going to have a heck of a hard time managing others.
Yeah, you could have easily, it could have been roles reversed where the drill instructor could have asked Gomez, well, why does Peck have a loose thread? And to the point, it's like, it's hard to, you can't, I totally agree with you. If you can't manage yourself, like if I can't get my own act together, how am I supposed to be a good father to set an example for my child? If I can't get my own emotions in check, how am I supposed to navigate and inspire and lead a team?
Yeah.
I love that.
The military was easy because there was always a consequence
Mm.
for an action. I mean, hey, if you did something wrong and you wanted to do the extra duty on Saturday in your uniform, they'd have you mowing the motor pool. You'd be engaged all day while everyone else was having fun and doing their thing. So you learned pretty quickly to fall into line, and that there were consequences every time there was a misstep. So
It really is a science of changing behavior, isn't it? When we're talking about leadership, it's like
yeah,
how can we help others to change their behavior that benefits themselves and the team and the greater community? I've never thought of that before you said that, but it really makes me think that way.
well, I think sometimes if you want the other person to change, you have to look at yourself and say, well, what do I have to change about myself?
Yeah.
And
Extreme
that's a hard
ownership.
one. That's a hard one because we want everyone to be like us and whatnot, but that's just not the case. I mean, I look at my wife; we're totally different opposites, but that's what makes it work. Uh, for us. So, but no, it's just you have to continually improve yourself. Has been pretty much the track I've been on for a while, just trying to get a little bit better every day, and hopefully it'll inspire some people to do the same or take that leap or whatever it is they're trying to do. But I certainly don't want them staying in a place or a position they're not happy in, because that's not good for anyone. So
Well, Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, to pick your brain, share some stories. Where can people find you online if they want to get in touch or connect?
oh yeah, thanks. Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I have all my data is on there, my number, website info, email address. I'd be happy to connect. When you send a connection request, I do like to meet the person for 15 minutes, half hour, just to kind of get to know them a little bit. But that'd be the easiest way. It's jeff.peck at eosworldwide.com, and eosworldwide.com /Jeff/Peck is the website. So, and thank you for having me, Russ.
Thank you
Enjoyed the
for joining.
conversation.
And for everyone listening, thank you for listening thus far. I don't run ads in the show. I don't want to. What I would like, though, is if you're listening and you enjoyed this conversation, it brought you value, share it with a friend. The only way the show grows is through word of mouth and referrals. And it would mean the world to me. I think Jeff and I can agree that we just want to leave this world a little better off than when we got here. So thank you and be well.